Good afternoon. Thank you for joining today's webinar, LinkSpring Presents Reflow. I'm Mark Peacock, Chief Marketing and Communication Officer at LinkSpring. Couple of housekeeping tool notes. One, we are recording this, and this will be available in the near future on LinkSpring's YouTube marketing channel. And number two, if you do have questions for us, use the Q&A button, and we'll try to get to as many questions as we possibly can. So a little bit of background. As building owners and operators look to do more with their building systems and equipment, they are looking for enhanced user interfaces, graphics, dashboards, and overall improved experiences. As previously announced, we are extremely excited to now be an OEM reseller of Reflow. We are offering Reflow as a standalone module, as an add-on to our Genesis, Genesis Edge, and Onyx LX portfolios. And we are also offering it at a service through our professional services team, whereby they can and will develop the graphics, interfaces, etc., for you or for your customer based on specific specifications. To give us a deep dive into Reflow, I'm extremely pleased to have joining us today Adam Bergman and Zach Overhausler from Reflow. Guys, your show, take it away.
Hey everyone, thanks Mark, really appreciate it. I'm Adam from Niagara Mods. We are the developers of the Reflow software. We could not be more excited to be partnering with LinkSpring and working with this extensive network of system integrators to deliver what we think is really cool solution for building owners and in the Niagara space. So I'll tell you a little bit about Reflow, sort of why we built it, the problem we're solving with it, and then we'll dive into some live demos. As Mark mentioned, please feel free to ask as many questions as you can, and I'll try to give an answer for every single one, and if we need to, we can follow up after the call. So Reflow was built really because there are some common problems that we've noticed in the industry. And the first one centers around building owners and their expectations for their systems. Really, when we look at expectations from an engineering standpoint, we've really, that nut's been cracked, right? The Niagara as an engineering tool is one of the best engineering tools out there. You're able to do everything you need, and it works in a system that's tried and true, and does what it's supposed to do. The other side of that, though, when we look at, we set down our engineering hat and we look at it from an end user, a building owner's perspective, what they often see when their first experience with their new building automation system is that is an outdated user interface. Oftentimes it will require extensive training, and part of that is because engineers, control systems integrators who aren't trained in web development, user experience, graphic design, those types of things, are often saddled with having to build this user interface, design it and develop it. And again, oftentimes it's just not something that's in a system integrator's wheelhouse as far as user experience. So the idea here is it might be engineered perfectly, but the first impression looks like something that's very dated, not as usable. On top of that, it doesn't work on mobile, and it can be complicated to even get something here that's not going to be extremely impressive to customers. And so really what that boils down to is building owners' expectations have been set higher, and that's because they're used to using apps like Facebook and Instagram their online banking apps. All of these apps have now sort of raised their expectations. And of course, these apps are being designed by people in Silicon Valley who are, have doctorates and PhDs in user experience. And it's just really hard for our industry to try to deliver the same level of user experience, even though that's what our customers are expecting. One other corollary I'll mention, oftentimes a building owner is going to go home and they're going to access their security system at home, maybe through their Ring app for a doorbell camera. They're going to access their lighting controls with a Philips Hue app or an Apple or Android Home app. So they're accessing their HVAC with Nest thermostats and things like that, all polished consumer level user interfaces, and then they go back to work on a system that's much more expensive and much more complex, and they're often left with something that's extremely out of date and not usable, and oftentimes won't even work on their phone. So what's the solution? Well, that's where Reflow comes into play. Reflow is a modern user interface builder, user experience builder that sits on top of Niagara. And that's really key. Again, Niagara is a great engineering tool, and so Reflow can sit on top of that. You do all of your engineering in Niagara, and then Reflow can sit on top and provide that end user experience for your customers. Reflow is mobile out of the box. It uses responsive design, which means the design of Reflow will shift depending on the size of the screen. The other really important piece with Reflow is not only is it going to give you a modern user experience for your customers, but building this experience and customizing it is as simple as using something like Squarespace or Wix. Anyone can build a website with Squarespace and Wix and those solutions, and the same holds true with Reflow. Anyone can deliver a modern building automation system very easily with Reflow. No web development background or graphic design background required. So we will jump into a live demo of Reflow. We've got a couple sort of sites that are skinned for different use cases. These sites are accessible, so they're available publicly. You can use them to share with your colleagues, show your customers, get them excited about what's possible. There will be a link in the PowerPoint here at the end of the session to get to this very same demo station that I've got pulled up in front of you. So when you get here, the username and password will already be filled out. All you need to do is click on the Login and Browse Demos button. And that's going to log you into a station and bring you this screen where we've got 3 demos available for you to check out. This demo here is a national multi-building retail site, so you'll be able to see many buildings spread across the US and how they can be visualized in Reflow. We've got a single building retail site here, which is just a grocery store, and then we've got sort of a multi-building single campus example here in Reflow University. And again, you can use these and get inspiration from them and share them as much as you want. To get started though, we'll go to the single building. It's healthy food. Just a quick note on these demos. They are all using fake system data. So we've got ramps and sine waves and things like that, moving the data and producing alarms and histories and things like that. So no actual equipment hooked up here, just sort of things emulating equipment. And of course, all of these brands are fake and brands that we made up. So you can show them to anyone and know that it's not actual, customer work here. So when I first log into Reflow, this is the experience that I get as a building owner, as an end user. Notice I'm not seeing things like additional Niagara web UI or even the mention of the word Niagara. I'm the owner of the building at Healthy Food, and I'm seeing my Healthy Food logo along with a title, my address, and all of the entire experience is branded in its colors and its look and feel towards my company. So we've gone from accessing the building automation system like it's a router or something, and now we've gone to this experience where we've got this live branded site that matches my company branding, and it's ownable and it's contextual to me and to my building. When we first open Reflow, we get to this landing page, and this landing page has a dashboard. We've got some dashboard cards. In this particular instance, many of these, including the gauges and these histories here, are built in to Reflow. So you point a Niagara history at this card, and it will visualize it for you. Here we've got freezers and coolers and their temperature. These cards here are actually PX views. So not only can you Reflow's tools and cards that are available to you to get content on screen, but you can also customize and build your own fully custom content and pull them into the experience. And at that point, building PX files becomes very simple because you don't need to worry about navigation and logo and pulling things like color through, because Reflow is going to handle all of that for you. The other really cool part about Reflow, and this will be the first of many times I'm going to do this today. Reflow, I mentioned it's responsive, and how that works and what that term means. It means as I move my screen, as I make my browser window, in this case, smaller, you can see that Reflow shifts and changes automatically. So in this here is more of like what a tablet, like an iPad might look like. You can see there a dashboard automatically went down to 2 columns from the 3 or 4 that we had. And then if I go even further and I go into what the size of maybe a mobile phone here, you can see that things like the navigation at the top have the standard mobile menu icon. Our text has gotten smaller. We're fitting more information on the screen. And then as I scroll down, you can see that our dashboard has now gone to single column. And all of that's done automatically for you. So you as a system integrator don't have to think about screen size if you don't want to. You can just rest assured and know that Reflow is going to show the content in a beautiful way, whether it's someone on a small phone screen or it's being projected on a huge screen in a conference room. It's going to look great. So a couple other areas of Reflow. I mentioned the navigation bar here at the top. This is fully customizable, again, colored and branded based off of the brand colors. Reflow can help you drive consistency in your jobs because you're only setting these colors once, and Reflow pulls them through everywhere. And then below that, we've got on our landing page, we've got a listing of equipment. And equipment in this case is categorized by type. And I can click on types or click on devices to get more information. Before I do that though, let's take a look at some of the other features in Reflow. So you saw some histories and some gauges down here. I'll just sort of go across the top here and click on alarms. Alarms in Reflow require almost no setup. Reflow, again, living and working in Niagara means that it can access all of the systems in Niagara, and those systems, essentially, we don't have to recreate the wheel. So Reflow reads the Niagara station's alarm database. And so just by dragging the Reflow service into your Niagara station, you will get an alarms view that looks like this. And then, of course, you can customize your priorities, their names, the colors that they are. But when it comes down to linking in alarms, that's something that you don't have to do in Reflow because it reads them from Niagara directly. This is an example of a modern alarm console. You've got your table rows of sources down here at the bottom below the priority shelf. When I click on a source, I get to a listing of records on that source, a very similar flow of what you would expect from Niagara, however, just visualized cleaner and in a more responsive way. Clicking on a record itself is going to pull up this really nice summary window. I can move between records using these arrows here. I can acknowledge from here. And then if I wish, as an end user, maybe I'm familiar with the Niagara alarms table and I want to see the data in that way, I'm able to switch to the table tab and see all of the sort of raw values that you would expect in an alarm record. I can also add notes from here as well. And again, every action that I take, every note that I add, all of those things are done on the Niagara alarm database. So if I add a note, someone pulling up these alarms in Workbench is going to be able to view those notes just as they would if the note was entered you know, in the engineering tool or in the web UI or anywhere else. Some other features that you'll notice in Reflow is over on the top right, we sort of dubbed this the power to the user area. It allows users to look at the data and self-serve. And so what I mean by that is they can export this table themselves if they need to. They can filter by priority or whether alarms are active or unacknowledged, all themselves, and they don't have to come back to the system integrator and ask them to build out different views or build out functionality. Really straightforward and simple on the alarm side, but as we get into things like equipment, you'll really see where that can be very powerful. In this example, we don't have schedules pulling in, but Reflow does something very similar for schedules. So it will pull all of the schedules from the station into Reflow. You can hide and rename schedules very easily, and it will pull them and give them those same options for the user. I think we'll have an example of that here in a bit. But alarms and schedules essentially work the same way. The other thing that I want to show you about Reflow and responsive is how things work in mobile. And I've got an iOS, an iPhone simulator here pulled up. And I'm just going to open the same demo site here in Safari on this iPhone. And I'll just log in. We'll sort of do like a bit of a side-by-side here on mobile versus desktop experience. So if you've never had the pleasure of trying to read a long, a very multi-column table that's also has many records on a phone, oftentimes you're scrolling up and down and moving left and right as you're trying to find the proper source, and then it refreshes, or you want to remember what this column is, and then you're often scrolling back up only to lose your space vertically and horizontally, and you're doing this multi-axis scroll that's very frustrating as an end user. In Reflow, we eliminate tables for the most part. We eliminate tables in mobile, unless you specifically enable them, by changing rows to cards. And so this is the type of experience end users expect from a mobile app or from a mobile website. No longer are we scrolling up and down and left and right. We're scrolling in a single direction vertically to get to all of our data. And you can see that now these columns across the top are over here in the cards on the left, and the value for each column is very easy to read and understand for each single row, which is a card. And so you'll see this across the entire app on not only in alarms, but in dashboards and other tables in Reflow. They will get turned into cards on mobile. And these cards function the same way as table rows. The action menu is available and easy to tap on from mobile versus how it would work in desktop here. And then also things like multi-select, selecting multi-rows and taking action on those rows all work the same and as you would expect on mobile. So no functionality differences there. Everything you can do in desktop, you can do in mobile. It's just formatted to be more approachable and easier to use. And we'll come back to this every now and then as we're looking at features. Okay, so moving from alarms, let's jump over to histories. Histories works in this with the same idea as alarm. We live and work in Niagara, so we have access to the Niagara Histories database. Reflow can read and pull all of the records, all of the histories in your Niagara History database, can pull them in and make them available here in this sort of database view. And if there is recent data, when a user hovers over, they're able to see just the shape of the most recent data. And they can determine based on that shape and when the last value was taken, if they want to click and dig into the data deeper. And here we've got a rich charting system. Users can click and drag to zoom. They can switch between delta or the actual results. Users can change the chart type that they're looking at. We have quite a few different chart types to look at, and they can actually export images of this chart or download a CSV file of this chart as well. And of course, we have a table view where you can just pull open the date and time along with the value that we're looking at. When users want to compare data, they have multiple options. So if I want to compare this space temperature to what it looked like in the previous period, the previous hour. I can do that very easily. So now I'm comparing this hour versus last hour. The other thing that I can do, if I just turn that off, I can look at other points, and I do that by clicking this Add Chart Data button. This experience here is sort of like, think of it almost as like a shopping cart. I've got my shopping cart basket up here. I've got one history selected. If I want to pull in other histories, I can. Like for instance, if I just start typing in space temp here to filter, I'll look at, we've got AC 01 or 02 pulled in. I'll add 01 and 03 and 04 to my basket up here. I'll click the view chart or the checkout button, and now we've got this history with 4 lines on it. And of course, if I wanted to compare previous hour, I could still do that here. Another thing I'll point out, you can see this orange and this green, it matches our logo, and those are 2 colors that were set up when I set up the site in Reflow. This blue and this sort of teal and purple color here, those colors were Reflow looking at my brand colors that I set up and mathematically generating complementary colors so that the other records on the chart and other colors used in Reflow will be complementary to those branding colors. Of course, they're customizable. If you don't want to use those auto-generated colors, you don't have to, but it's just one great example of where Reflow is going to make your work look as good as possible. And part of that is, selecting the right colors and making sure they're eye-pleasing and go well together. And Reflow does, everything it can with math to try to help you along the way there. Here's a delta view of that same chart. So that's a little bit about how our histories work. Now, all of these histories come in automatically. Again, as I mentioned, you can look at them in a table view as well. And then in addition to that, you can create your own featured histories as a system integrator. If there are specific things you want your users to be looking at, or there's specific things that they want to pay attention to, you can set up a featured history that goes right at the top here with previews that automatically load. And then they can get there very quickly for that to that data. So that's sort of how the history systems work in Reflow. And again, a lot of it comes in pre-configured, and then you really just go in and make some minor tweaks to the configuration to get things up to sort of how you want. And you're sort of rocking and rolling from there. You may have seen me search earlier, just showing you sort of what else you can do up here. If you click this filter button, you can sort by type. You can also sort if you've got history groupings and tags enabled in Reflow, or sorry, in Niagara. You'll see an additional drop down here for those tags. You can change the order. And so all of this stuff is available to the end user. So finding data that they need is very straightforward. There's AHU1 there. So really quick and easy for them to access the data that they need. Okay, let's take a look. Next, we'll take a look here at equipment. And again, this is a single building site. So all of this equipment sort of belongs in a single floor of this grocery store. Here, and we've got a couple extra things thrown in here as well in this demo. When I browse equipment in Reflow, I can group by type, or I can group by floor. Reflow prefers to sort things by type because we can do a lot of really interesting things for you automatically. So we've added about 15 VAVs for this building, and I can click on a VAV to get taken directly to the equipment graphic. In this case, we've got a PX file that's very simple, showing ductwork of the VAV and fans and things like that. Again, notice very minimal, very simple. We've got maybe a couple values that we're accessing here. And then below that, this is all built automatically by Reflow. So you set up your zones, determine how you want your points to be named, and Reflow will map in all of these points from the VAV device and make them available to the end users in this responsive way down here. So here we're in the zone group. We can collapse groups. And as an integrator, you can determine if maybe you want certain groups collapsed by default. And then each point in here, if it's interactive, you'll have a little arrow down here. And when you click on the arrow, Reflow will give you options depending on the point. So here, this point is not writable, but it does have a history associated. Reflow automatically maps that history to this card for you. So this required no setup. just had to point the device at reflow, or sorry, point reflow at the ORID of the device. It pulled in the points and mapped them for me, and it noticed that this point has a history and takes me right to it. It's even going to update the breadcrumb. It knows that we came from VAV01. It's changed the chart title to match the point name that's being displayed to the user. And for the user to get back there very quickly, they can just click on the breadcrumb and get taken right back to the equipment graphic. Now for other things that are set points, here you can see this occupied cooling set point has some actions associated with it. And again, reflow has connected to the point in Niagara. It knows what actions are available to the user. And I'll just, since it's already overwritten, I'll just set it to auto. That action has ran, and now it's set back to its default value. If I want to overwrite it again, we'll just bump it down here, hit OK, and that's been set. And so I'm able to interact with points very easily in reflow. And what's also really important is that the way the end user is going to interact with these points is the same on their desktop as it is in mobile. So if I bring my phone simulator back over here and I jump over to equipment and we go to that first VAV, here's an example of what the view is going to look like in mobile. We still have our title bar, our graphic here, the sort of the representation of the physical equipment. And then below now we've just got a single column of point cards. And I don't need to teach my users, well, on desktop, you're going to want to right click, and on mobile, you're going to want to tap, but you're going to get this weird looking menu that comes up with all these things. No, it's the same consistent interaction. On mobile, we're tapping, we're accessing a history. Going back on mobile, we are tapping, double click to zoom, move up, hit OK. And now we've got that override at 73, or if we want to run an auto, now it's back to 6. So consistent user experience that changes shape based on the device that it's connecting with. Really important. The other thing on devices that I want to show you is devices automatically link to their building and their floor. They can also be served by other devices. So this VAV is served by RTU1, which we'll go to in a second. And this VAV has a schedule associated with it. And when you click on that schedule, here's the standard Niagara schedule editor. You can pull it up and edit and save the schedule as you need to. When I click on RTU1, which serves VAV1, you can see just another example of how you can build an equipment graphic in reflow. In this case, we've got larger cards on the right and the graphic over here on the left. All of this is configurable, and you can set it globally or for specific equipment. Here, as I scroll, you can notice that our title, our links at the top, and our graphics stay in frame as I'm scrolling through these points over here on the right until I get to the bottom. And then if I scroll all the way to the bottom where I click on this serves 5 devices, which will scroll me to the bottom, I can now see every piece of equipment that this RTU is serving. And I can easily get there and then back and forth. So I'll go to VAV2, and then I can get back to RTU1. Here's an example of what these larger cards look like. So same stuff underneath, but just a little bit of a larger format. And you also saw, like, when I ran this override, I'll just run this quickly. You can see that we're showing status here. These are your standard Niagara status colors. When we think about how we provide access to users for devices in their system, one of the things that integrators often find themselves doing is building long lists of equipment and tables of equipment. And hopefully the first time you build that table of 70 devices, you don't hear back 2 weeks later as you're trying to close out a job that, oh, this new stakeholder happened to see the graphic and they want to add 3 more columns, because oftentimes it's a very manual process. Reflow tries to help you there. And one of the ways that it does is with our equipment type summaries. So I mentioned that all of our equipment is grouped into types. And so if I click into VAVs here, And by the way, types are fully customizable. You can add as many types as you want. You can rename them, and you can anything you'd like to do, you're able to do. But in this case, we're using just a standard VAV type. And you can see I've got all my VAVs listed as cards here, which are going to show 1 point and a thumbnail. And you as an integrator determine the featured point. That's what's showed here. But what's really cool is the end users, they have some power over this view. And this is just for them. When they make changes, they aren't saving it anywhere. This is just their current view into the system. They can click up here and they can pick any point on these VAVs and look at that point across all devices. This page is built automatically for you. No configuration necessary. You certainly can configure it to do different things, but this will get built automatically just by adding the equipment to Reflow. The other thing that end users can do, and you can set this as a default for your equipment type, is there's a table view. And so now we've got each VAV listed as a table. Of course, clicking on it, just like clicking on one of the cards, is going to take me to the equipment graphic. But now I'm able to see multiple columns and compare that data across all of the VAVs. Same power to the end user. Hit table options, go to edit columns. Now the end user can remove columns from this view and add columns that they may want to see. So never again should you get a call after a job's been closed out and says, hey, we've got a new stakeholder. They're really interested in seeing, mode next to occupied command. And you have to go in and edit PX files that, maybe you didn't even build originally. So again, really, really important that users can get to the data that they need quickly and easily, ideally without giving you a call. And so you're able to do that. Additionally here, on top of the user being able to create custom views, you can create third and fourth and fifth views for the end user. They would appear in a little star over here if you had created additional custom table views. And so you can give them, some starting points for the types of views that they may want or need. So really, really straightforward system that's very powerful and really tries to, push the end users into seeing the data that they need to see. Last thing we'll look at for this example is the floor plan. Now, Reflow comes with a pretty robust floor plan editor. It is not going to build 3D floor plans for you. You're still going to pull in the map of your floor, whether it's 3D or just AutoCAD blueprint type drawings. You're still going to pull that in and use that as a background. But what Reflow is going to provide you is these user interface elements to put on top. And they're labels, zones, arrows, buttons, icons that you can pull in, very similar to a PX editor, move them around where you want them to be. But there's a few other concepts that really bring a floor plan to the next level in Reflow when compared to doing the standard PX. One is we allow you to pinch and zoom and pan around a floor just like you would in Bing or Google Maps. So you can click and drag all around the map. You can zoom in as far as you need, fit it back to the screen very easily. A lot of these labels come in automatically. So in Reflow, when you identify devices, you say this RTU belongs to this building and this floor. That label comes in automatically into our floor plans. It's hyperlinked automatically to the equipment, and its featured point, which on an air handle or on this RTU is the average space temperature, comes in automatically, also automatically linked to this label. Zones can have dynamic colors, and those will change based on values bound in from Niagara. And then the other thing that's really, really cool inside of Reflow that can really give your floor plan some additional depth is our state system. So with states, you can show different views of this floor plan without the user ever having to leave the page. And you can see this little drop down over here, it's set to overview. The end user can come in and say, oh, I just want to look at dairy. And now only the dairy area and the components showing information for that is visible to the user. Here's produce, here's frozen. And then maybe I just want to look at the HVAC system only. Here's my comfort zones, and here's my rooftop units available. And again, this is all one floor plan, and the user can toggle the states to look at the data they want. Here in another example, we'll show you the same thing, but with lighting and HVAC. And we've seen lots of amazing use cases of this technology where people are showing egress paths, where they're showing desk occupancy right next to HVAC data and security data and even network drops and things like that, all accessible by the customer from this drop down in one single place. So again, it's all about giving them a single experience. This is their building, this is their floor. Sure, it's going to have HVAC and energy data, but any other data is accessible from the floor, because that's sort of how the user is thinking about their systems. Their system is a building with multiple systems, not an HVAC or a building automation system sort of separately and independently of that. So this sort of allows you to sort of meet them where they are as to how they think. Okay, so I'm going to pause there just for a second and give anyone to ask any questions, give them a second to ask any questions about this specific demo. I'm going to switch over to a different demo and just take a quick sip of water here while we're waiting. All right,
So Adam,
just
this is Mark. I'm gonna go ahead and ask you one verbally instead of typing it out. So again, can you just explain briefly about the color palette that that Reflow has in it, so that if I'm a system integrator and I've got 6, 7, 10 customers and I'm utilizing Reflow and I want to make some uniqueness to for each of these particular customers, and I can do that with color. Can you just kind of just quickly go over that again, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So in our first demo here, you saw the green and orange being pulled through the experience. I'm going to open up a different system that we've got running, and this is more of a bare bones solution. So this is my Niagara Web UI. You can see Reflow. This is the only thing you need to add to your station to do everything that we're looking at in the demo. When I click on the Reflow service, it's going to open up in what we call the Reflow view. This is the end user view. You can also redirect this view so that it's more like this, so you don't get any of the Niagara Web UI accessible. But the view that we're interested in to go through that discussion is the config view. So this is where you as a system integrator will be spending your time working and building the experience for your customer. And you can see that we still have our Reflow view over here on the right. We call this area the preview. But over here on the left is where we make all of our updates and make all of our edits to customize our site. And here we've got sort of just the university example on the right. So when we're talking about color, you click on theme, and everything I change over here on the left is going to be reflected in the preview sort of automatically. So I can change this to Link Spring University, and you can see how, again, as I'm typing, it changes. As I'm typing very badly, it's changing there on the right. Now, if I go into colors, we have this concept of a primary and a secondary color. Primary color is used to indicate action, and anytime that we want to draw the user's eye to the most important part of the area. In this case, in the card, it's the track color and the icon color. In this alarms card here, it's the icon. When we talk about secondary color, we're talking about color to add accent. So the green underline here, when I'm on my alarms console here, when I highlight, it's the blue from the primary. When I select, it's in the primary, but this secondary action bar here uses the secondary color. So if I were to change these colors, for instance, if my customers, colors are, let's say red and gold, I can choose primary as red, secondary as like sort of maybe a golden color here, something like this. And you can see how instantly that's really changed the look and feel. And of course, if I pulled that through on the logo and things like that, you'd really pay off. And you can see here's those colors being automatically generated now for me, the secondary green there. Everything instantly changes. So when you talk about driving consistency in your work, if you've got multiple integrators working on a job, or you yourself come back to a job 3 months later, you'll often get that, we always call it, 50 shades of blue, right? I know it's a blue color. It's sort of, yeah, close enough. And then a month later, it's like, sort of, yeah, that's good enough, right? And then you've got all these different shades that make your work look inconsistent to a customer who, has oftentimes spent a lot of time and effort and money in a lot of cases on perfecting and picking those colors and choosing their logo and things like that. So this is going to keep things consistent for you to where you don't even have to think about it. Another thing, I mentioned logo. So like when we come in here to logo, it's this easy. I click on the image, I hit browse. I'm now browsing my station file system. I can click into here, and we've just got a whole bunch of logos of folks that we've just grabbed. Just grab a Ford logo here. There we go. So I can very easily change this logo off of anything in my station file system. And I can even do things like set the height. And this is really important. Notice I don't get a box where I can just drag and skew this logo every which way and make it no longer look like a hexagon. All I do is set the height in Reflow. And Reflow sets the width for me automatically, which means I'm never going to skew an image. I'm never going to, have that awkward moment with a customer when they make a comment on, how bad their company name looks on the work that I just did, because Reflow is going to make sure it keeps the proper aspect ratio. So we put a lot of things in here to help make sure that your work looks really, really good. The other thing I want to mention, well, you saw in logo, there can be a separate height for mobile. And so I can change that, but you don't see anything changing on the right. And that's because we're in desktop mode, of course. With Reflow, we allow you to preview your site. You don't have to have this iPhone simulator like I have installed as a software developer. All you do is click on this responsive bar, and you can change your preview to go from desktop to tablet to mobile. You can even click again and go to landscape mode. And one of the things that I meant to show you for the mobile experience is how floor plans look on mobile. We'll jump over to healthy food and look at that really quickly after we're done here. But it really allows you to preview the way your system's going to work across all screen sizes without having to, understand the development tools, get simulators, use an actual device. It's all available for you very easily right here.
Thanks, Adam. Again, I think that's, I think that is a unique, one of the many unique things about Reflow, again, is you don't always have to use the same thing so everything looks identical for different customers. Sure, you can have that choice if you'd like, but the point is there's a lot of easy customization that can be done for each customer depending on their need sets.
Yeah, great points. And another area where you can really add some flourishes is here in the hero image. So pictures of buildings, pictures of interiors look just amazing as background images. We call this area the hero of Reflow. So you can change these around. You can choose sort of, are we focusing on the top, bottom, or center of the buildings? And then you can even add a tint. So this white probably would not, if I just clear the tint out of here, probably a little hard to read up against this photo. Really easy to just darken the photo a little bit. And now the text really pops. Same thing with this navigation bar. If I wanted, I could just sort of leave it very simple like that. Or I can go in and add any color that I want to show. Control the transparency, and of course, I think it looks nice as white there. Hit OK, and there we go. So yeah, really easy to go in and add those little important details that really make the site feel clean and really well done. Talking about floor plans, so we've got some, we looked at the floor plan in desktop mode. I want to show you what the floor plan looks like in mobile. So I'll just click here on the mobile menu, and I'll go to floor plan. So very different what's in front here on the phone versus what's over here on the left. I can still click in here and change states to where I'm only looking at dairy or just HVAC if I want. But very, very different. And the reason why we do this is because oftentimes floor plans are large and they require large screens to really be able to read and understand the information. When you are walking through this grocery store, getting stopped by customers as the store manager, trying to do all of the things that you're responsible for. When you want to know if the freezers are at the proper temperature, having to stop and fiddle with your phone, pinch and zoom, get out your bifocals to try to read those very small numbers on a map can be very difficult. So we pull the important information up front and we show it right in front of the user. Easy to read, very legible, very suited for a portrait view on a mobile phone, walking down the aisle. Now, if the user does want to see the view, all they have to do is rotate their device. And when they rotate their device, they get a full screen view of the floor plan. And what's great about this is now all of the other UI has gotten out of the way. The floor plan is as big as it can possibly be on this mobile phone. And the user can, then pinch and zoom and pan around to view what they need to view. All of it very easy for them to do. So those are the types of things like that's the type of experience that a user is expecting when they're interacting with content on their phone. It's also very, very hard to do something like that in a PX file. If it's something that you figure out how to do, you're the best PX expert in the world, odds are you probably don't have enough time to replicate that on every floor on a job, right? And again, Reflow, we've thought about it, we built that experience into the application, and you just sort of get it for free by building a floor plan like you normally would. Okay, let's jump over to, I want to show you quickly the multi-building retail demo here. This is a little bit of a different dashboard look here. We've still got our weather and things like that. Here we've got a table card built out showing savings for energy that energy savings initiatives that they may have at branches. And we're also showing a most efficient branch, and this can be dynamic based on Niagara points here. And then below that, we've got our building map. So we saw how Reflow can work and work very easily and well in a single building. When we add many buildings to Reflow, though, you can also have a really nice experience for your end users. And this is one of those pieces in the map. So this map has all of our buildings, thumbnails load in for each building, along with the number of floors and devices. Of course, these are retail mobile phone stores, so typically one floor and only just a few devices in each building. Clicking on the name will bring me to the building page. And then each building in Reflow can have its own dashboard, and you see those cards here. And this is a little bit of a different style of dashboard. We accomplished this by just using photos with that tint color that I showed you earlier on the history. Here we're pulling in lighting information. We're pulling in an indoor air quality rating that's built and calculated in Niagara. And then over here on the right, we can even pull in essentially anything that we can pull into Niagara, which, as everyone on the call knows, is essentially anything you can display in Reflow. So here's an example where maybe we're using a security connection to pull or a schedule to show whether or not the store is open or closed. We're using that same connection to security to show the number of staff members that have badged in at the beginning of the day. We're connected to the queuing system at the retail store that's showing the average customer's wait time, and the feedback system that's pulling in the average rating. So now a user is not only connecting to their equipment data inside of Reflow, but they're also seeing other important metrics that sort of go along with that branch and that building and the services that that building is providing to the organization and the organization's customers. Below that, we've got some lighting control. When I click on these cards, I can just run these actions. The lighting commands take just a second to go through. So as I'm clicking off on all of these, you'll see them sort of come through here, just about a few second delay here, and they switch over to off. This particular floor plan is also interesting in that we've got an HVAC view of our floors, and clicking on any one of these zones will take me directly to that equipment page. But the other thing that we can do is if we go back to the first floor, I can switch over to lighting. And now we're seeing lights that, remember, I turned them all off. So let's turn them back on here. So I'm clicking on each lighting zone. These are just single clicks, not a right click. And I'm just sort of going through and turning on all the lights on the floor. And you'll see them all just sort of filter on. So that's a great example of how states can be used. And then when I have multiple buildings, the other thing is we've got this building drop-down menu here, both here on the sub navigation as well as on the main navigation. We click on branches. Not only can I get to each building, but each building is separated into territories. If I go to all branches, we'll get our map as well as our territories. Clicking on the territory is going to bring me down to all those buildings in that territory. And these are infinitely deep as far as the level. So you could go from a continent down to a country, down to a region, down to a state, down to a city even. And they'll sort of display out like this with headers for each region. So really easy way for you to take a lot of buildings and give some structure and some context to users and help them get to where they need to be. Of course, you can restrict users, and not only with the standard Niagara features as far as using Niagara security to prevent people from accessing points, devices, history, so on and so forth. Reflow respects all of that. But you can also, if you want, then go further in Reflow in the configuration under user profiles. I'll just pull that up here quickly. And I can add a profile, select a role, or select a specific user and determine their access to buildings or equipment pages and things like that very easily as well. So it truly is, the multi-user support works across the entire system. Okay, so we have just a few more minutes here. I want to make sure that we do have some time for questions. I'm just going to start sort of clicking around here in the configuration just to give you some more ideas of how this works, specifically with navigation. And I'd love for you to see how easy it is to add, update dashboard cards and things like that. So feel free to fire away any questions you may have.
So Adam, Mark again, I'll just use voice since I have that command today. Anyway, so a couple things that, continually strikes me as this being really awesome is one, Reflow knows no building types. In other words, for the most part, any building type, commercial office, school, airport, data center, retail, whatever, Reflow is applicable for. Is that a correct statement?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. And again, it doesn't matter size of building. It could be a 25,000 square foot facility of some kind, all the way up to 250,000 square feet, high-rise office building. Another correct statement?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we've done is you can break out things like equipment, alarm, schedules, histories by building, and then you can further break out buildings either by floor or even by area inside of those buildings. So the system is extremely flexible, and originally we designed it, we thought it would be on a single Genesis like controller for smaller jobs. We got a ton of interest in multi 100+ building footprints. And so we quickly added a lot of those larger sort of enterprise level features. And, today, 2 years after our launch, we support everything from the smallest edge device with just a one or two device graphics all the way on up to campuses with hundreds and hundreds of buildings, or portfolios rather. With
cool. Cool.
And I'm just building a dashboard card right now. So I'm just creating sort of my lobby space temperature card. I've used photography here to really give the user a sense of context, which is really important with user interface. They walk through this lobby every day. They can know instantly that this is the space temperature of their lobby, probably without even the need for me to type in lobby there, right? Because they're contextualizing based on the photo, and these photos are super easy to just take with a phone and put into your station file system, and they'll look beautiful in Reflow. I also pulled up, I pulled up our icon library. Reflow's got 1,800 icons for you to use in 3 different weights. Pretty much any icon you can imagine yourself ever needing, from things like bells and schedules and calendars, all the way on to more crazy things like unicorns and aliens and space invaders. There is an icon for it, so you can pull those in and use them in your content very easily.
So again, it's Mark, that you have been extremely successful in really bringing in a complete closed loop application from interface, dashboards, so forth and so on, into Reflow, which I think is amazing, especially the ability here to look at it from a desktop view as well as a mobile phone or pad or whatever the case is. And I know overall that's been a challenge in our industry, to be able to easily go back and forth from a laptop view to a phone view. And I commend you guys for being extremely successful, being able to do that very, very easily, very easily.
Thanks. Yeah, it can be difficult to do, and it definitely requires a background in web development and graphic design, and that's not what your typical system integrated controls contracting company has on staff. And even though it's expected from our customers, it's not a realistic expectation to hire around. So we're just trying to bridge that gap.
Gotcha. So with that, we're coming up on the hour, and Adam, Zach, again, our thanks to you. As I said, this is now available through LinkSpring. It's on our price list. Interested, contact marketing and or sales at LinkSpring or your business development person. And we're here to answer questions. Again, we will also we are recording this, and we'll send out a message, a notification when that's available. And again, guys, great product and solution. And thank you to the both of you for your time. Thank you to the audience. Greatly appreciate y'all's attendance as well. And have a good rest of your day. So long.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, everyone.